you of that. Some people are born into greatness, and some people have greatness thrust upon them, which is what has happened to you. I remember speaking with you when Reverend Sheila was making her transition, and all the feelings that came up of you having the ability to say yes. And yet Spirit was very clear with you to say yes. You know, Eckhart Tolle, a wonderful author, writes, always say yes to the present commitment. Say yes to what's in front of you. Say yes to life, and see how life suddenly starts working for you rather than against you. You see, an ordination is an opportunity for all of us to say yes to that which is in front of us, to step into who we are called to be. And so this morning I have 3 ways that I want you, Holy Reverend of God, to say yes. And all these 3 points work for each and every one of us in this space. Number 1, don't hide out. Number 2, you are a broadcasting station for the universe. Turn up the volume. 3, you have forgotten, but I am reminding you today, and I'm reminding all of us, you have always been supported. Always. Since day 1. One of my favorite stories is told by one of my favorite authors, Robert Fulghum, who writes the following. In the early, dry October Saturday evening, the neighborhood kids are playing a game called hide and seek. How long since I played hide and seek? 30 years, maybe more. I remember how. I could be part of the game in just a moment. Adults don't play hide and seek, not for fun anyway, and it's too bad. Did you ever have that kid in the neighborhood who always hid well and you couldn't find him? We did. After a while, we'd give up on him, leaving him to rot wherever he was. Sooner or later, he'd show up all mad because we didn't keep looking for him. And we get mad back because he wasn't playing the game the way he was supposed to play it. There's hiding and there's finding, we'd say. And he'd say it's hide and seek, not hide and give up. And we'd all yell about who made up the rules and who cares anyway. No matter what, the next time, he would always hide just as well. He's probably still hidden somewhere for all I know. As I write this story, the neighborhood game goes on, and there's a kid under the pile of leaves, a young little girl, in my yard, underneath my kitchen window. She's been there a long time, and everyone else has been found, and they're about to give up on her on the base. I've considered going out to the base and telling them where she's hiding. And I thought about setting the leaves on fire and driving her out. Finally, I stuck my head out the window and I yelled, "Get found!" And I scared her so bad she wet her pants, started to cry, and ran home to tell her mother. It's really hard how to know to be helpful sometimes. A friend of mine last year, this is my part, a personal friend of mine had cancer last year, walking the same journey with me, because I had cancer. He was a doctor. He knew all about dying and didn't want to make his family and his friends suffer with him, so he kept it a secret, and he died. Everybody at the memorial said how brave he was to bear his suffering in silence and not tell anybody. But privately, his family and his friends were furious with him. He sent them a strength and a message that he didn't need their help. He hid well. Getting found would have kept him in the game. It's called hide and seek grown-up style. You know the old game, wanting to hide, needing to be found. I don't want anybody to know. What will people think of me? Better than hide and seek, I like a game called sardines. In sardines, the person who's it goes and hides, and everybody goes looking for him. And when you find him, you get in there with him, and you hide there with him. And pretty soon, everybody's hiding all together, stacked up like a small space of puppies in a pile. And pretty soon, somebody farts and giggles, and everybody gets found. Medieval theologians describe God as Deus Obisticus. But me, I know better. God is an old sardine player and will be found in the exact same way everyone else is found in sardines, by those piled up together in the end. Ollie, ollie, oxen free. The kids are hollering that cry that says it's a brand new game. Get found. It is a brand new game, Rev. And it's time to get found. It's time for your community to get found. It's time for each and every person in this space to build this community. It is not her job to do this. It is our job to do it. It is our job to take these powerful principles and take them out into a world that longs to know that it does not need to hide behind ego, that it does not need to hide behind fear. There are 3 simple rules that I keep clear in my life. Number 1, if you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. Number 2, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. And number 3, if you do not step forward, you'll always be in the same space. Step forward. You never lose by loving. No one I have ever known has shrunk to greatness. The power to say yes to greatness means expansion. It means vulnerability. I say that to you this day because it's a glorious day, but I want you to remember it when it's not a glorious day. Ministry can be hard. People won't always love you. I know it's a shock, but there will be struggles, there will be challenges. But I want you to remember, Reverend Twana, there is no one who ever shrinks to greatness. And that as you make your way, remember that the eye of the sparrow, the eye within you, is watching you. Secondly, you are a spiritual broadcasting station. Turn up the volume. Our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, wrote about this. He wrote the following: do you ever stop to think that you are a spiritual and mental broadcasting station, and that messages are going out from you in all directions, perhaps even whilst you are asleep? We are told that the mental atmosphere of a home can influence a dog or a cat or a canary to the extent that they become neurotic when surrounded by unhappiness or cynicism. Human beings become the same way when we are surrounded with negativity. We are all broadcasting stations, whether we know it or not. Our thoughts, our feelings and emotions, our faith, our fears tend to make an imprint upon our environment and manifest. We are also receiving that which we are sending out. The radio broadcast that is so alive. If a person's mind is filled with animosity and resentment, people will feel it, whether or not we say a single word, because the power of the universe echoes in our hearts. On the other hand, if you are surrounded by people who have resentment and animosity, but you have none, you will not tune in. Their vibration bypasses you, and their antagonism does not arouse or even invite you in. It is the same with everything in life. A person's thought is filled with fear of failure, will tune in and pick others up as well. But those who are confident and expect good things to happen vibrate a frequency that can change the world. You are a broadcasting station. Tune in to the high frequency of the one, of the power. Do not make excuses like Jeremiah. Step up, step in. Wake up our founder writes, "Your word is all. It's all powerful. All consciousness is one with the omnipresence. Your thought is infinite. Your destiny is eternal, and your home is everlasting heaven. Realize this, that you are living in a perfect universe that longs to call you to your own perfection." Tune in. Tune in. And last but not least, remember you are always supported. You just have forgotten. I remind all of us of that. Some days I get up and I am magnificent. Have you ever had that experience? Then my husband reminds me sometimes I'm not. And my community will remind me of that often. And the only way that I get back to center is to remember who I am. There's a wonderful little story that I love. It's a woman called Sashi. It's a little girl. And she said soon after her brother was born, little Sashi began to ask her parents to leave her alone with her newborn baby brother. They worried that most 4-year-olds that she might feel jealous and want to hit or shake him or do something to him. But she showed no signs of jealousy. She treated the baby with kindness, and her pleas to be left alone with him became more urgent, and they decided to allow it. Elated, she went into the baby's room and she shut the door, but left open a crack so her mom could watch. They saw little Sashi walk in quietly up to her baby brother, put her face close to his, and said quietly, "Baby, tell me what God feels like. I'm starting to forget." Since you were born in your mother's womb, you have been cared for. You have been breathed the very breath of God itself, Ruah, as we hear in the Hebrew Scriptures. Remember who you are in the good times, the challenging times. Always become quiet and recall why you came here in the first place. We must have a spiritual rebirth. We must be born out of a belief in the externalities to belief that inner realities are the very voice of God that echoes in our consciousness and in the halls of our mind. And to close, I tell you my most favorite story in life. There she was in the Hong Kong airport, tensely occupying her chair. Everything about her said she was a young American going home after a wonderful journey. Lucky kid, I thought, until she began to cry. Huge tears were dripping from her chin. I imagined she had lost the love of her life or was afraid, so finally she used my sleeve and 2 others until she finally told me the story. She had lost her airline ticket. She cried all over again as she told me this incredible story. I and an older couple from Chicago offered to take her to the powers to be to remedy the situation and to get her a new ticket. She stood up, she turned around, she picked up her belongings, and she screamed. We thought she had been shot, but nope, it was her ticket. She had been sitting on her ticket for 3.5 hours. Like a sinner safe in the jaws of hell, she laughed and cried and left the entire lounge delirious from her drama. I've told this story countless times. It could be marked on all our graves. You were sitting on your own ticket. Reverend Twana, get off your ticket and go to work. Thank you.
Reverend Norman, that was perhaps, in fact, definitely, the most cogent, erudite, heartfelt, perfect ordination message I've ever heard in my life. And I know who your inspiration was. Sitting right there. You know, it was a number of years that I had the great pleasure of meeting Reverend Twana whenever Reverend Mike and I would come to the Center of Peace for any of your activities. And I was always tuned in to your station. I always knew there was something quite special about you. It was not that Reverend Sheila's light and your light were any different from one another, and yet the beautiful vessel in which each of you expressed that life was just so perfect and went together so well. She knew. There are things I didn't know. And for instance, a couple of years ago, when you asked me if I would mentor you, I was so honored. I was so touched. And our meetings every month together, all this time, have been so precious. And we had been meeting together for a while before. One day I asked Reverend Twana, "Who's your sponsor?" She said, "You are." Reverend Norm is my mentor. And it didn't change anything in terms of the joy of our monthly meetings. And you would drive out from the Center of Peace, and we would have these precious times. And oh yes, she's very much on time. This woman is all about being on time, which I honor about you. Only once, when all the roads were torn up. But even then when you arrived, I looked at you and said, "Reverend Twana, you have calmness about you. No matter what you move through, there is such a centeredness and such a peace. It's so appropriate that you are the center of peace." And it's been such a privilege to work with you, because there were times when our time would be up and you would be off to your next meetings that I would think, what a gift this woman is to me, that you have mentored me throughout this time. I have learned much from you, and I'm so grateful to you, and I honor you. I also love that you have been a hospice chaplain, as I have been, and I know what it's like to be a midwife to someone who is transitioning from one place to the next. And that's exactly what you're doing here, but they're alive and going to stay so for a long time. Every transition in life is something that requires the kind of strong, passionate, loving leadership that you bring. And every one of you who has worked with this beloved minister for all of these years in several different capacities knows what a beautiful midwife Reverend Twana is. So I'm very grateful, and I'm proud of the fact that I get to do the official ordination. But I had to say a little bit first, because I love you with all my heart. Thank you. Well, we're going to present wonderful Reverend Twana Malone to be ordained into the ministry of Centers for Spiritual Living. And I think I'd like to ask Deborah Ford to stand for a moment. I want to ask you a couple of questions as the president of your board. On your feet, girl. Thank you. I love surprising people. Deborah, are you convinced that Reverend Twana Malone is prepared and worthy for the office and work of an ordained minister of Centers for Spiritual Living?
Yes.
Thank you. It's very clear, there's no doubt in my mind or anyone else's mind that God already ordained this marvelous minister. It's an inside job. And this is just the party. But it's official, so I have to read the script. She has definitely been found to be prepared and ready to receive ordination in the Centers for Spiritual Living. And so we're gathered to witness a magnificent ceremony of initiation, welcoming, and transformation, which could be her middle name, Transformation. Ordination is an initiation